for joining us today for the Office of Criminal Justice Program's Introduction to STOP Funding. We are going to go through some of the different facets of STOP funding that we have here, reporting, invoicing, and hopefully this will provide you with some base knowledge for your new STOP grant. Okay, first, what is STOP? STOP is a program that supports communities in their efforts to develop and strengthen effective law enforcement and prosecution strategies. The Stop Violence Against Women Act program was authorized through the Violence Against Women Act in 1994 and reauthorized and amended in 2000, 2005, and 2013. So this is funding our office, the Office of Criminal Justice Programs, receives from the federal government for specific programming. And we will talk about that here next. If you ever wonder why we have specific solicitations on our website, different subject areas, it is because the federal government tells us how we must allocate our STOP program funds. 25% should be toward law enforcement, 25% to prosecution, 5% to court, 30% to victim services, and 15% in discretionary funding. So if you are in one of those categories, law enforcement, prosecution, etc., that is how we allocate our STOP funds that we receive, and that is how we base going out for our solicitations and our strategic planning, along with input from other partners in the community. So we are responsible for reporting how the funds are spent and ensuring those funds are spent in a manner that is allowable and reasonable to the needs of the project. So you guys report to us, we also report to the federal government. In saying that, the hardest part of your project should be actually doing your project, not the administrative obligations. Our grants manual, which I will share with you further down into this presentation, the administrative part should not be the hardest part of this. We make it very clear in our manual what's expected of your programs. We have what's expected in your personnel files, what's expected for invoicing. All of those things are in our grants manual. So the hardest part for you should be actually implementing your project and collecting that data you need with your projects to see how your project's doing and how to make your project successful. So really, you can break down your administrative obligations into reporting, which we will go through, invoicing, which we will go through, and communicating, which, just stay off the top, and I'll say this many times throughout this presentation, communication with your program manager is key. That is what we are here for. We are here to help your program be successful. Don't feel scared to contact your program manager if you have questions about your project, or you think you've done something wrong, or you think you've done something right. Keep in touch with your program manager and let them know how things are going. I want to start all this off by kind of going through the two main parts of the personnel on the grant. You will have the project director, and the project director can be, somebody in charge in your organization, your executive director. It could be the person who is on the grant as the grant employee, but the project director responsibilities are all kind of all-encompassing for making sure that the project is successful. And I like to go through these, through this and the fiscal director position's responsibilities so that everybody knows on the front end what those responsibilities are. Number one, ensuring that the project is implemented as described in the project narrative and logic model, and or assuming oversight for the direct or subcontract services provided. If you're the project director, you should make time to make sure the program is running like stated in your logic model. And that's what we will look for when we come out and monitor your agencies. We will look through your scope of service, the project narrative or logic model, whatever we're calling it that day. We will go through and see what your activities are, see what your goals and objectives are, see what your numbers are, and use that as the basis for our monitoring visits to see how your program is progressing. The project director must also ensure that all grant requirements are completed and documented within the specified deadlines. We provide you, and I'll show this later on in the presentation, we provide you with a reporting schedule for each of our fund sources, and it has on there links to all the different reports, the due dates, who should do what if you're a nonprofit or a government agency, and when things are due. So like I said in the beginning, Our manual is very specific with what is due, and you just have to make sure that you have that in your file and that you have the deadlines written down and that you meet those deadlines. The project director is also responsible for ensuring that client files are maintained on each individual receiving direct or subcontracted services. That file should contain the information regarding your client, the services that were provided, the referrals that were provided, depending on what kind of agency you are and what kind of services that you are providing. If you're a staff prosecutor, you should have down in your file that you referred somebody to the local shelter. If you are the local shelter, you should have in your file what services you provided that client when they came into your shelter after being referred by the staff prosecutor, for instance. All of these things should be notated in your file so that when a program manager comes out to monitor your program, they can look in your file and see that you're meeting all those goals, objectives, and activities that are stated in your logic model without even having to have a basis of knowledge for what your program is. Most of you will have, or all of you will have program managers who are your program manager and your program monitor. But in the instance that somebody has to take a leave of absence or something like that, you want your files to be in such a way that anyone can walk in and see that you are meeting the goals, objectives, and activities of your grant just by looking in the file. The fiscal director, this is another big thing as we had around this last year with invoicing issues with some of our agencies. The person who is the fiscal director does not have to be the fiscal director for your county, for instance. The fiscal director needs to be somebody who is willing to take the responsibility for the fiscal matters relating to the grant-funded project and is in charge of accounting, management of the funds, and verification of expenditures. You need to, as we'll talk about further into the presentation, the fiscal director should be able to have the time to invoice at least on a monthly basis. They should be able to oversee that the expenses being charged on the invoices are accurate and allowable under the grant. They must have an accounting system and keep records to accurately account for the funds awarded, because while you do undergo a program monitoring, you also undergo a fiscal monitoring, and each one of these things can happen at a minimum of once per 3-year grant cycle, or more depending on how your agency progresses through the monitoring process. There is a link here at the bottom that has the grants manual and the financial requirements for an agency as part of our grants manual. You can actually, when I give you the website for the grants manual, you can download a copy in PDF. It's fantastic to Control F and word search if you have questions yourself about anything you need. For example, Control F word search personnel files, and you can find what all is needed in a personnel file for your agency grant-funded employees. So we will move on into reporting. Stop reporting is actually very easy. You only report once per year at the end of the fiscal year in July. So your grant cycles run on the state fiscal year, which is July 1 to June 30th, not the calendar fiscal year. So every year by July 31st, you have the annual report that we provide you from the federal government, that you report all of your demographic and service information for the fiscal year. So you need to have a way to calculate this information throughout the fiscal year. If you have an Excel spreadsheet, JustWare, or some other sort of database that you use, just make sure you have something that captures that information. And you will also have a client annual outcome report due on July 31st of every year. Again, this is an annual report, and it's a report that combines all the survey responses from your clients for the fiscal year. Under STOP, as with VOCA, you should be handing out surveys or attempting to hand out surveys regarding services satisfaction to your clients that come through the door. And, you know, at the end of every year, you will report those responses to us through our Ocjp portal and form stack, and there's a link to that report in the grants reporting table. So you need a way to be able to calculate that information, combine it for the year, so that when it comes around to July 31st, you're not manually sitting around trying to count survey responses. But these survey questions are in your logic model or project narrative, and they could vary depending on what kind of agency you are. Staff prosecutor survey questions may be very different than a shelter survey question. So make sure you have your surveys with your questions, and then you're trying to hand them out to all clients who visit your facility or come into your office or that you serve under this grant, so that you can report those survey responses at the end of the year. Some of you will have annual training as part of your logic models, or maybe all of you, depending on how your logic model was written. Again, at the end of the year, by July 31st, you should have all of these survey responses tabulated in the same, kind of in a similar manner that you do with your client annual outcome report, so that you can report to Ocjp the survey responses for your training. A STOP prosecutor may train law enforcement on discovery, or how to write a better police report, or how to get information from a victim that is helpful to the case in case the victim doesn't show up to court, how to gather, extra information. A domestic violence shelter may go out and train law enforcement or other members in the community regarding certain subject matters. So you need to make sure that you have these survey questions, which should be in your project narrative, on a survey form, and that you should be distributing them to any of your training events put on using STOP funding. And if you're a STOP prosecutor, you are extra lucky because you have quarterly reports due on the October 15th, January 15th, April 15th, and June 15th regarding your client served. This is not for all agencies. This is just for our STOP prosecutors. And I have the STOP prosecutor contracts, and if you are a new STOP prosecutor and you have questions, feel free to get in contact with me, and I will give everybody my contact information at the end of this presentation if you have any questions. Here's the STOP reporting table that I spoke about a few slides back. On it, we have the contact information for questions and for submitting invoices, which should be submitted at minimum quarterly. We recommend monthly. The client survey annual outcome report I spoke of, the annual progress report, which I spoke of, the program income summary report, which I have not spoken about yet. And that report, if you are a nonprofit agency, is due, it's due every quarter. I mean, if you're a government agency and you have program income, this report is due quarterly on the dates listed on this table. If you are a government agency with no program income, this report is only due on the last day of June of each year for the subsequent year. So you would submit on June 30th or June 31st of each year for the prior fiscal year if you had no program income. Skip down 2 slots and you'll see the Policy 03 quarterly expense and revenue report. This is the quarterly income report for nonprofit agencies, and these are due on the dates listed on here on the table for nonprofit agencies. We go back up 1 slot, you'll see the equipment summary report. If you have purchased equipment as part of your grant for this fiscal year, let's say fiscal year 2019, by July 31st of 2019, you should submit an equipment summary report outlining the equipment that you purchased with the grant funds. If you did not purchase equipment with your grant funds in that fiscal year, this report is not required of you. So again, these are just spelled out what I just talked about with the program income summary report, the equipment summary report, and the Policy 03 expense report. So here is the web page that I spoke about for our written manual. If you, this is posted on our website. If you want to copy and paste this, I will give a moment, or jot it down, take a picture with your phone. I'll give you a moment to do so while I speak a little bit more about it. But as you can see on this reporting page, there are tabs for the different fund sources. You have FIPSA, JAG, SAS, STOP, BOCA, and FJC, and then all fund sources. So there are specific reporting requirements for each fund source and reporting requirements for all fund sources. So when you go to this web page, make sure you check under STOP and all fund sources. On this web page, you can also see that there is a link to our grants manual, to any grant applications we may have open at this time, to grants management resources, and to civil rights. Additionally, our strategic planning and our best practices and innovations. You can go and look at those at your leisure just to see what we're up to here at Ocjp. So invoicing. In order to be reimbursed for program expenses, you must invoice the state. And we say at minimum quarterly, but no more than once per month. And we recommend once per month. How do you invoice, you ask? Well, the state will provide you with an invoice workbook that will contain your grant information. If you not received a copy of this workbook within 60 days of your contract start date, you can email the obf.grants@tn.gov email and include your contract number, and or email your program manager if you don't have your contract number or you are not getting a response from the OBF, Office of Business and Finance. Be sure to email your program manager. Again, you will send these completed invoices to the obf.grants@tn.gov, and invoicing usually takes about 15 days for reimbursement. Again, these STOP funds are reimbursement type grants, so your agency will expend the money and then submit an invoice to the state for reimbursement under STOP for those funds. So once you get your workbook, what do you do then? Well, you open the invoice and you'll see this spreadsheet that's pre-filled out for you. If you see the red arrow over total contract budget, those are all the things that are stated in your contract budget for the fiscal year that you're currently in. And since this is STOP, this is a 75-25, which means your agency should be bringing a 25% match to this grant. So each month you will go in. Let's say if you're, in March, so if you are invoicing for the month of March, you would select March. If you're invoicing for January through March, you'll select March. Really, it's the tab that contains the last day of expenses included in that invoice you are submitting. And you would actually go into this tab that says this month's actual expenditures. You see the red check marks over here on this last slide. So you would submit those monthly expenditures, including your in-kind or cash match amounts. So let's say that you submit salaries of $4,000 for this month, and you had cash match of $1,649.40. That is the total amount in this month's expenditures for salary, which is $5,649.40. If you have in-kind expenses, there is a line on here for those in-kind expenses. If you are going to purchase a computer if you have space donation for match, in-kind match, that is where you would put that. And I encourage everybody to make sure that you are putting your in-kind and cash match in your budget, because you are reimbursed at a 75-25 ratio. So if you're not accounting for your match on your invoice, it will look like you're not being reimbursed your full federal dollar amount. And that's the next question I have on here. I didn't get the full amount of my invoice. Well, in order to ensure that you're compliant, we reimburse at 75-25. So as long as you're keeping your match in there, maybe one month you have no cash match, and you only brought cash match on your invoice, and you didn't have any cash match for that month. You didn't buy the computer. You didn't purchase pens and paper. It may look like you are not being reimbursed for the full federal dollar amount that you've submitted for. And I've had this question numerous times. Well, that is because over the course of the year, your federal dollar and match amounts will ebb and flow. And by the end of the fiscal year, you should have been reimbursed that 75%, which is what your federal dollar amount is. And that remaining 25% would be that cash or in-kind match that you brought to the table for your contract. So just make sure you're keeping up with that so that you are being reimbursed over the course of the year for all the federal dollars in your contract. Again, it is very important that items expensed to all line items are allowable by the fund source. So make sure that you are, one, in contact with your program manager if you have any items that need to be pre-approved for purchase. Two, that you've read the manual and that you know what are allowable and unallowable. And three, if you have any questions, contact your program manager. If you need to purchase any items that require pre-approval, your program manager will be able to give you that approval via email, and then you will keep that approval in your grant file in your agency office for when such time as you're fiscally or programmatically monitored. So just a few things that are unallowable costs under STOP. And you can see right here, legal or defense services for perpetrators. Fundraising is a big one. Lobbying is a big one. If you're a nonprofit agency and you require fundraising as part of a job description, Please contact your program manager because fundraising is not allowed under STOP. And you want to make sure that what you are doing or asking for that grant-funded employee is not unallowable under the STOP funding. Again, you can see a more exhaustive list of unallowable expenses at the web address at the bottom of the screen. There are also some things that are allowable with permission. Like I said, if you have things on your budget that require pre-approval, such as sensitive minor equipment, capital purchases, furniture, salary adjustments, please don't go change your grant-funded person's salary or job title without letting your program manager know and getting approval. I've had this happen before, and it did result in a finding. If you have staffing changes, we have specific requirements regarding notification of staffing changes on our website and our manual. Please let your program manager know when you have a change in staff or when you have a change of anybody who is listed as grant personnel, such as an authorized official or a fiscal director. Please let your program manager know in the allotted time as stated in our grants manual. Again, the most difficult part of your project should be doing the work outlined in your contract, not fulfilling these administrative obligations. You should have somebody in place as a project manager who can just take on and make sure that the client services are being provided and documentation is being completed. And you have a fiscal director that's invoicing the grant when proper with proper and allowable items. You should, you should just really, the hardest part should be concentrating on implementing that program. If you have a new, domestic violence initiative in your agency that we are funding under STOP, or you are a new STOP prosecutor and you're really trying to get law enforcement involved with, arresting perpetrators and making good police reports, that should be the crux of your job, not the administrative part. That is outlined for you. It should not be a surprise. And again, you should have people in place in your agency who are making sure these things are completed. Again, reach out to your program manager whenever you have a question or a problem. I, as a program manager, would much rather be asked if you could do something or say, I have an issue or we have something that's come up and my job is to work through it with you to get you a satisfactory answer that not only keeps you within the allowables of the STOP funding, but also helps your program move forward and progress. If it's something that you need to expand on, or if it's something you need to change, just make sure you keep your program manager in the loop. They are here for you to help your program be a success. Again, thank you so much for attending this STOP WebEx. If you have any questions, you can reach out to your program manager, or you can reach out to me. My name is Renee Howell. I'm the program manager here at the office handling STOP prosecutor, legal aid, CASA, victim witness coordinator type programs. My email is renee.howell@tn.gov. Again, I hope this has been informative. I hope you're able to go into our website and download the manual and read through it. And again, if you have any questions, reach out to your program manager, and we look forward to working with you guys on your STOP project.